Good afternoon. This is Paul Johnson with Film Obsessive, and I'm here today with writer, director, filmmaker Philip Gelatt, who has made They Live, They Remain, The Spine of Night, currently a writer for the Netflix series Love, Death, and Robots. And we're here to talk a little bit about his background and his work. So, welcome, Phil Gelatt. And last weekend, you were back in your hometown of La Crosse, Wisconsin for a screening of The Spine of Night, your animated fantasy film from a couple years back. I'll just begin by asking, what was it like to return home and share your work around friends and family?
Oh, it's great. I mean, it was a great experience. We've Spider Man came out in. I mean, I guess are we still in the pandemic? I don't know. It came out earlier in the pandemic, so we had a theatrical release, but I wasn't really able to travel with the film. I wasn't able to go to film festivals with it, except for maybe I think we only went to one. So to get to play it in my hometown in the theater that I grew up going to see movies in was a pretty amazing experience. I mean, it's I will also say this: Spider Night is its content is not family friendly, so it's a little bit awkward to show your to show your very violent, very naked animated film in your hometown. But you know what? My parents didn't come, and everybody who did really, really enjoyed it. So it was great.
That is great. So you're co-owner of the Rivoli now, is that right?
That's correct. Yes, my siblings and I bought it almost exactly a year ago. So, the Rivoli was in La Crosse. My sister is sort of the expert on the history of it, but it's the oldest theater in La Crosse. It was built in the silent era, I think in the 20s. So we've actually seen now it's I mean, I love history in general and old buildings in particular. We've seen now the original designs, and actually the very first um upgrade they did to it was to add speakers because talkies had happened. So it was built as a silent film, became a talkie theater, and was so it's been there forever. When we were growing up, it was a second run theater. Or actually, I'm not even sure that's true. I think it was first run, and then it closed, and it reopened as a second run. And it's in a beautiful and amazing old place. So the guy who had owned it for decades passed away during the pandemic, and so my siblings and I learned it was for sale, and they both live in La Crosse. I don't, but and so we decided that we were gonna buy it and keep running it as a movie theater, which has been wild. Like I mean, I work in film, but not I've never worked in like exhibition before. It's a whole other thing. But it's been great so far. Like I said, we had it for, I think June is our 1 year anniversary. So
So, what do you see the role of a theater like the Rivoli as an art house or second run theater? What's you and your siblings' vision for it, and what do you see the role of these kind of theaters playing in the industry in the future?
I mean, that's a super good and complicated question. I think, my brother lived in New York for a long time and was a really big fan of, I think it's the Nighthawk Theater in Brooklyn, and, sort of the Alamo Draft House. There's this model that's existed of, they're not, cineplexes, but they're sort of curated, quirky, interesting, cool places to go see movies, and you can get alcohol and you can get food, and they play interesting things. So I think interesting things that reflect, I mean, maybe not so much the Alamo anymore, but that reflect the people who are programming the movies. They sort of like it's like a place you can play stuff that you like. So that's sort of the core vision of it right now, is to play interesting stuff. Like we have this, I'm trying to think of the best way to explain this. It's complicated. So first of all, let me say we're not we exist right in this moment in an in between place where we can play first run movies, we can play repertory movies, and so that's sort of we're sort of skirting the line between the two at the moment. So for example, we played Mario Brothers, and it was a massive success. At the same time, we also did Spine of Night on one on one Saturday night, which is, there's no other movie house in the country that has played both of those movies on the same day. I feel confident in saying. Um, so I think we want to keep that going, and I think just really globally, that our hope with it is that it is a place that continues to introduce for people who have never been to movie theaters before or don't like movie theaters, it's a place that they go and they have a good experience and they want to come back and go see movies more and more. And for people who love movies and they sort of went away for a little while with the pandemic, but now they're back, we want to make sure that it's a special experience when you come and see something cool at the Rivoli. I mean, I have to share one anecdote, which was really sort of clarifying for me. When I was there for Spine of Night, I was behind the counter. I was like rolling posters because we were giving posters away with the movie. And Super Mario Brothers let out, right? So Super Mario Brothers, it's all kids and their families. And one little girl, I'm not sure how old she was, but she was like, "Excuse me, I need to ask you a question." And I was like, "Well, I don't really work here. Let me get my sister." So I grabbed my sister. And this little girl had a ton of questions, and they were sort of like, it took me a while to understand what was going on. But her first question was like, "Why are you showing, like, why are there two movies? Like, what's like, how many times do you show the movie? What's," and the subtext of all of her questions was basically that she'd never been to a movie in a movie theater before. Like, she didn't understand what it was. Like, she didn't understand that this is a place where you go and
Wow.
it's a big screen and so anyway, say what you will of the creative merits of the Mario Brothers movie. I was, it was like the best thing I've ever heard, because it was like this little girl who came, saw a movie in the movie theater, loved it, and like wanted to understand like if she could come back and like see something else and like what like what other things might she see there. So that was really great. And that's, I think that is, I don't know. There's something in there that speaks to think what our hope for the theater is, which is like you want it to be, just like a cool place to go do something with other people and see a great movie and have a good time. So not sure if
And
that
that is
answered
a
the question, but
that does, and that is a beautiful story. I really, really want to thank you for sharing that.
yeah, it was
So
really great.
what do you recall about your childhood that got you interested in films and filmmaking?
Oh, that's such yeah, so many great questions. I mean, I'm not sure when I first, like I said, I mean, I grew up with movies. I grew up in the 80s, so we had, a VHS machine, and I was always going to the Rivoli, and at that time there were a bunch of other movie theaters in the Cross. And so I loved them as a kid for sure, and like loved Indiana Jones and loved Star Wars, like loved Star Wars a lot. But I don't. I think if I had to really pinpoint the moment at which I like movies became like my thing, there were a couple of them. There was one summer when a cousin of mine who was close to like we would hang out every summer, and one summer he was just like, "Well, this summer we're going to watch a lot of movies," and I was like, "Oh, okay." So he had this list of movies that I don't know where he'd acquired it, maybe his older brother, so my older cousin. So we watched Aliens a lot. I'm trying to think what else. Maybe Predator was on that list. It was sort of like I must have been early teens, so it was slightly an older set of movies, not so much Star Wars and Disney movies. So that was big for me. And then there was also, my parents got divorced when I was probably honestly the summer after the summer I was referring to. And it's at that point that there was a real, like, I don't know if you want to call it escapism, probably a little bit, but I definitely remember the movies that I saw around that time were the movies that I was like, oh, this is like really important to me. Like this is the places that I go and they're like interesting, and I'm seeing something that I love and I'm thinking about it after I've seen it. So I mean, I can tell you that was the summer. I'm not sure what the release dates, but like Pulp Fiction is a very vivid memory. Seeing Pulp Fiction in theaters at that time, it must have. I don't know what the time span between Pulp Fiction and Rodriguez's Desperado is, but like I remember seeing that as well, and like the internet was around. I don't really know how I understood there was a connection between the two films. Like I somehow knew that that Tarantino was in Desperado and that they had so that also was interesting because it was the moment when I started to really think about the people that make the movies too, and not and just like what they were doing. Oh, around that time I also got into John Woo movies. Can't remember how I got into John Woo, but it's sort of like and it was that sort of like teenage emotion plus a realization that there were other types of filmmaking and there were filmmakers making movies that probably really got me on the path that I ended up on, I think. So
And you went to school specifically for filmmaking?
so uh a little yes, but there's a more complicated answer a more complicated answer there. I mean, I went to so I'm by nature not a particularly outgoing or like what's the word? It's gonna sound terrible. Uh it's not like an egotistical thing to say that I'm not very egotistical, but like to make movies, it requires like a pretty forceful personality. And so when I went to I knew I loved movies. And to be totally honest, though, when I went into college, I never thought I was going to make movies. The program that I entered was a cinema studies program. So it was watching a lot of movies and thinking a lot about movies and like writing a lot about movies, reading a lot of like critical theory that nobody really cares about unless you happen to be in the in those particular what do you call them, departments or whatever you want to say it. So the only class I ever took in college that was related specifically to making movies was a summer school class I took that was like screenwriting. It was like a 8 week
Mhm.
class on screenwriting taught by an actor. So he had us do like acting exercises before we were writing. Um, but then at some point, so I knew a lot about movies. I didn't really get into the path that would lead me to making them until after college when I was where I got an internship at a like an indie film company in New York, and my job was, I mean, I was an intern, but I was like the script development intern. So I was reading their slush pile. So and just I didn't have a lot of friends, so I would read a lot of scripts their slush pile. Just like I was the intern that read the most of the slush pile. Basically, they would hand me 5 scripts, and I'd read 5 scripts over the weekend and like do synopsize them and say why they were bad. So and it was while I was doing that that suddenly I was like, these are all really bad. I could probably write something better than these. It wouldn't might not be great, but I could probably do better than the majority of scripts I'm writing. And that's really the moment at which I started to on the path that has led me sort of, you know, to everything else. So uh again, long-winded answer to that question, but that's that's how
That's
it
all right.
happened.
And then when did you feel like this was who you were, and that this was the thing that you would be doing?
Oh, I mean, I don't know if I've had that feeling yet. I'm in my 40s now. I'm
Okay.
still I'm still occasionally like, ooh, maybe I should do something else. No, I mean, I yeah, I don't know. Like there's so many moments that are like, well, so I wrote that first script, which was a horror, like a horror. I mean, it was I should dig it up. I haven't read it in a long time, but the first draft of the first script I wrote was very much me thinking about everything that I like in movies and cramming it all together. So it was like horror and it was science fiction and it was sort of like surreal and strange. It was just like everything crammed together. But it was ended up being sort of good enough that the people I was working for were like, hey, this isn't bad. We'll help you develop it. And then from there, I sort of got a manager, an agent. So that was that like that's a moment when sort of validating when it's like, oh, here's somebody who thinks they can make money off of you, which is ultimately what an agent is. Um, so that was something. That was a moment. I think yeah, I mean, it's that's such a hard question. I don't know. Like I mean I know I was joking, but like I still but I was also honestly like I occasionally I'm like, I don't know, maybe I should be doing something else, or maybe that was the last one. Maybe it's time to do something else. Um
Well, if it matters, I feel like this is the thing you should be doing,
well,
but
thank you.
I'll
I
let you
I
make your
appreciate
own
it.
decisions
I mean,
as you go.
I will say at this point in my life, there's probably nothing else I could do. So I'm sort of stuck.
I want to get to your directing and to some specific works in a little bit, but first let me just ask a couple questions about the writing. I know you both adapted other people's works, like the story 30 for They Remain. I know that you've written your own screenplays for The Spine of Night and episodes of Love, Death, and Robots. And I'd just like to ask a little bit about where your ideas come from, what your process looks like. Are you the type to like make an appointment with a keyboard every morning, or do you wait for inspiration to come?
Yeah. So uh where ideas come from is such a hard question. I at this point tend to prefer to adapt something because I'm a coward and it's much easier to look at something and be like, here's like it, the horror of the blank page is erased, right? Because you
Mhm.
sort of you see it and you can understand what it is and you can pinpoint what you like about it. And then as you're adapting it, there's still a lot of creativity there, but you always have a kind of guiding, North Star that's leading you forward creatively. Um back, I mean, I still do original stuff in my writing, and those ones are they're hard to come up with, and they honestly tend to come from um I mean, I was joking about the first script I wrote, where I was like, I took everything and I crammed it together, but that's still kind of how I how I generate new stuff. And oftentimes it's as simple and sort of silly as like going to my bookshelf and like thinking about, oh, what if this character from this book was involved in a situation like that character in that book? It's sort of like, like a mixing and matching circumstances and characters and ideas from stuff that I like to see if they lead somewhere new and interesting, uh I think there's also a lot of the stuff I've written, from scratch. I've tried to keep it very contained and small because I think that's, it's easier to make it, easier to get made. So that is also a useful creative impetus, is like, what are the restraints? What restraints can I put on this idea, and how then does that help me mold the story? Um, so but in terms of writing, like a day-to-day writing process, I write every day. It really sort of depends on where in the process I am. Like if I'm doing a first draft, which is, I mean, always the most painful thing in the apps in the world to do, I will, and because of that, I am very, I try to be very stringent that I will write, you know, I think at least six scripted pages a day until that rough draft is done, just so it can get done. And if I'm not sticking to that, it's so easy to think, well, this is garbage. Like, why would anybody, like, you just have to force, or at least I have to force myself to get through it. But there's so many different stages to writing. So like if it's outlining, or if it's outlining is a little bit more wishy-washy for me. I'll sit down, if there's an outline I'm working on, I have no set amount I'm going to do, but I try to look at it every day, because if you don't look at it every day, it's never gonna get done. So you just gotta, like, um and then rewriting a script is actually my favorite thing, because it's so nice to, again, there's no blank page, all the ideas are there. They may not be great, but you can really sort of get your hands dirty and massage it and move scenes around, and do that kind of stuff. So but even while rewriting, I try to have a set page number that I'm going to rewrite on a day. It's more than six. It depends on the project. Usually it's at least 10, because it's faster, and it's not so hard for me to do it. So I think I can get more of it done. Um, yeah, but that's sort of it. Those are sort of the basics.
I remember reading in your press material for The Spine of Night, you're mentioning that the world was feeling, quote, increasingly like a nightmare, maybe some sick cosmic joke.
Yeah.
I would just ask a little bit about the impetus for that film, and like if you recall, like when you felt that way specifically, and
Yep.
how that film is reflective of that
Yep.
sentiment.
So uh there's a couple of ways to answer that. I mean, that film took a long time to come together. So we wrote, Morgan, my co-writer and co-director on it, wrote that script a long time ago. We wrote it probably at this point 9 years ago. And at the time, it's like a sword and sorcery fantasy film, but it's pretty dark in its conception of mankind, and power, and those sorts of things. So, even at the time, I don't know if I would have termed how the world felt at that point as a sick cosmic joke, but or whatever turn of phrase I use. But it was always sort of running, it was always running through the DNA of that film, that it was taking broadly a bleak view of existence, even if on a character level specifically you have characters that are, trying to do the right thing, and
Mhm.
trying to make the best of a bad situation, which I guess I would say is all any of us can do in our lives, right? um but that specific quote, I probably was referring to, I definitely wrote, it's definitely referring to the pandemic, and just the general state of probably mid 2020. It was like middle of a, I mean, I don't want to talk about politics, but middle of a presidential election, regardless of your politics, a very difficult time, middle of a pandemic, and just this general sense, I think, um that whatever order of the world there might be, it's always sort of in danger of eroding and changing. Like this, you can't help, I think, at least I can't, at certain moments, from like, I don't know, waking up and finding yourself in the middle of history that's continuing to unfold. Like there's just, it's the state of the world, right? Like your things
Right.
are always going to be changing and deteriorating and those sorts of things. I mean, it's a funny quote for me because generally I guess I'm a pessimistic optimist or an optimistic pessimist. So it's probably slightly darker than I would normally code things, but not, I don't disagree with myself. I guess,
Okay. Was
Um yeah.
was The Spine of Night always intended to be an animated film? Was there ever a thought of directing it as live action?
So it was always going to be animated, and it was, I took it on. So the genesis of that project is Morgan, again, my co-writer, co-director. He had made a short film called Exordium that was set in the same world as Spine of Night, and I saw it back in 2013, 2014, or maybe 2015. I can't remember. 2014, I think, and loved it. And I thought it was, oh, this is exactly the kind of fantasy that I love. So I just approached him online. It was like, hey, I love this. Let's do something else together. And one of the reasons I did that was because, well, I loved the short film, but I also was like, oh, I love like I love Conan the Barbarian. I love big
Mhm.
fantasy stuff, and I just assumed that given the way that Hollywood works and my position in it, I was never going to be able to make a giant fantasy film epic. Like it just wasn't going to happen unless I worked with Morgan and made one animated because I thought we could do it independently, and I thought we'd be able to make whatever we wanted and be able to do all the wild stuff, that's in the movie. So, so again, short answer is no. There was never. We were always thinking of it as animated. It came from Morgan's specific style of rotoscope animation, and we always thought um, animation was the only way we were going to be able to do it. Like I don't think anybody would have let us. Well, I don't think anybody would have let us make that movie live action. I also don't think anybody would have let us make that movie animated, which is to say, we just went off and made it. And nobody like at no point did we really have to ask anybody for permission to do anything. It is, I can probably say, a movie in which we serviced no notes except our own notes. It was just like whatever we wanted to do was what we did.
Well, that's the thing I think I might love as much about it as anything else is, yeah, I mean, in that regard, it's positively brave and audacious and in some ways almost unimaginable. No one else is making films like that these days. Um, do like commercial considerations enter your decision making process? Do you like have anxiety at all during that process about, gee, no one else is doing this at this moment in time, but this has to consume a great deal of your resources, the animators, et cetera, to do
Yep.
that? Could you just talk a little bit about maybe trying to balance the prospects of getting people into a theater
Yeah.
with something that's really kind of off the beaten path, I think, for most audiences, with your own really felt need to make the film that you want to make.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to have sort of two buckets in my mind for the work that I do. One is the stuff that I'm paid to write, like Love, Death, and Robots is very much that. Although Love, Death, and Robots is also adult animation, but it's still in my mind different than Spine of Night. But basically, like my day job is screenwriter too. So for stuff that I'm paid to do and those sorts of like sort of stuff I think is going to go through the system, so to speak. I tend to think probably too much about the commercial aspects of it. Like what are because you just if you do it long enough and if you exist in that system, the Hollywood system long enough, like it gets beaten into your brain that you have to think about, oh, commercial this, commercial that. Oh, what's I think, you know, to be frank, I think that's sort of why a lot of movies feel the same because they're coming from a similar, at least a lot of American movies, I think, are coming from a similar set of instincts that are creative instincts, but they're also driven by commercial needs. With Spine comes from a totally other place where I wanted to again make the movie that I wanted to make or that Morgan and I wanted to make, and there still is a commercial consideration there. I mean, we obviously you make something and you want people to see it and you want to be able to reach an audience and you want that otherwise why do it? And you can see the commercial instinct in Spine some places. Like we didn't start with Patton Oswalt and Lucy Lawless and Richard Grant as voices. Like we brought them on way at the end, in the hopes of getting people to to come see it because they want to hear Lucy Lawless do a great performance. She's really fantastic. But then I also like I am even still probably woefully naive about what audiences actually want to see. And by that, in my, it's to my mind, Spine of Night is a commercial film. Like I don't really like, I guess I can sort of mathematically understand why it isn't really, or why it's so different than what other people might see. But to me, I'm like, oh, well, Game of Thrones is huge and people love like Lord of the Rings. And this is like, we are firmly within those genres. We don't have a big marquee IP, but we are within those genres, and we're doing it differently, and it's animated, and there's differences, but to me, there should be a sort of direct line from those audiences to us. I can say, I mean, the movie has been reasonably successful. It was not a huge breakout hit. What I can say I've learned from that is that the hump to get people, particularly Americans, to see an adult animated feature film is it's hard. Like people, they see that it's a cartoon, and they don't want to see it. Like it gets immediately pushed aside as something that's not for them, which is deeply annoying to me. I mean, probably it is a aesthetic commercial problem that will be solved after I'm dead, but I will work hard until I am such to get past it. Um, yeah,
You were
I
new to
think.
animation, right? Um, what did you feel like you were surprised the most by in the process of bringing that film to its fruition? What did you
Oh, I
learn,
mean,
like outside maybe of commercial factors,
yeah.
or just about the process of moving through pre-production, production, post-production for a film like that?
The most surprising thing, and it's not specific to animation, it's actually specific to Spine of Night, was
Okay.
and I may have more general answers, but the very specific answer is, the animation style we're using is explicitly based on the rotoscoping that Ralph Bakshi was doing in Fire and Ice
Right.
and his other movies. That's like Morgan sort of reverse engineered it, taught himself to do it, and that's the style. And those are, I mean, well, in animation crowds, Ralph Bakshi is very famous. Like that is a famous
Oh,
style of
of
animation.
course.
Well, I only preface that because I thought, and Morgan thought, that we were gonna get started and we were going to put out the call for animators who could work in the style, and there were going to be a lot of animators who were like, oh, finally, this is the thing I've always wanted to do. That is not true. That is or at least not in our experience. So we basically had a very, very hard time finding anybody that could do the style, a little bit because I think rotoscoping is poo-pooed even among animators still, and a little
Mhm.
bit because it's just really, really hard to do. It's a really difficult style. So I was surprised that it was so hard to find, yeah, animators that could do it. That caught me off guard. I think the other parts of the animation process, I don't know that I've been surprised by them. They're all really fascinating. Like there's so much um that you can, obviously, I mean, this is not a particularly deep observation. There's so much you can do with it, and there's so much sort of malleability to the visuals and those sorts of things. It's really I don't know, I love it. It like I say, I wish that there was more of it out there that was wilder and more visually inventive. I think like Spider-Verse is a good example. Like there's so what's frustrating about it is, I mean, it's literally you can do anything. Like anything you can imagine, you can put in an animated film so that therefore I wish there was wilder stuff instead of just, stuff for kids. But that's fine. It's fine. I'm not bitter.
Um, and no, that's okay. And so now, are you busy with Love, Death, and Robots right now? That's third season. Is it continuing?
So I'm not busy with it right now. There is a fourth season. At the moment, I'm on a couple of other projects, so I'm not actually even sure if I'll be on Love, Death, and Robots season 4. They might need to find other people to do it, but I'm not sure. We'll see. There is going to be a fourth. I did second and third season, and the fourth season is the next one. Um, but I will also say at this point I've written a lot of animated shorts. So if I'm not on it, that's fine. I've got you know.
And
Um,
what is next for you then, Phil?
oh, a couple of things. So I'm trying to think of the most. I do so many different types of writing. So I've been doing video game writing as well. A video game that I wrote on called Amnesia: The Bunker, which is a part of a horror franchise, comes out in May. People like that sort of stuff. It's really, really good. I'm really happy with how it turned out. Um, and then I'm working on another animated series for Amazon that's unannounced. That's with the same people that do Love, Death, and Robots. So I'm sort of, working on that at the moment. And then yeah, a lot of stuff that's just so much of screenwriting life is stuff that may or may not happen. So I'm looking at my post-it where I have like all the current projects, none of which are like they're all so far from fruition that they're not even really worth worth discussing, unfortunately. But stuff, things, constantly juggling things,
Stuff and things.
stuff and
I
things,
really appreciate the conversation, and I just like to ask people who are in the industry if they've got advice for that next generation following along.
Oh
Maybe
yeah.
those people who were like you a couple of decades back,
Yep.
a young kid in a small town with maybe a big dream or two.
Yeah, I mean, it um my advice would be, well, a couple of things. One, like read and watch as much as you can. Uh because I think, you have to, if you're going to do something, it behooves you to understand what's been done before, right? It can, to be inspired by, or to maybe even more useful to push against, like find something that you hate and you're like, I hate this so much, I have to make something that's better than it, is a really, whatever emotion you need to start, I think find it and use it. Um, I think also, it took me a long time to develop a certain discipline in terms of writing. Like as we talked about before, I think working on that is really important. Like you can't. Yeah, these things seem like tautologies or self-evident, but like if you can't have done a thing if you don't do it, right? Like so you can think about all you want, but you like sitting down and actually doing it is important. Um, and then my other piece of advice, which is don't be afraid to be weird, like whatever form like visual entertainment takes in the next decade or century, like and nobody really knows what it's going to be. Maybe the 90-minute film survives, maybe it all just crumbles away into like short TikTok videos, who knows. But like regardless of what it is, the job is to find your voice, to find like what makes you weird and interesting and unique, and do it. So that might seem sort of contrary to my advice to read and watch as much as you can, but I actually think it's part of it, because to really figure out your own voice, you do have to sort of chew your way or digest your way or watch your way through what's come before. It'll help you hone your particular set of skills and your particular thing that you want to do. And I guess like my other piece of advice is a pretty obvious one at this point to anybody who has a phone in their pocket, but like everybody has cameras. Like anybody can make a thing, The problem really now is getting people to watch the thing, but go ahead and start making it, like there's really no reason not to. Yeah. So read and watch, be weird, be angry, and then just start doing it. That's my that's my advice.
So words of wisdom from
Yes.
Phil Gelatt. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us at Film Obsessive, Phil. We appreciate it very much, and we look forward to seeing more of your work in the future.
Thank you so much.